The 18th century is an important one. It helps to introduce ideas that are going to direct our modern age. It begins, the first half of it, with the Rococo. It will end in the second half with neoclassicism and romanticism. Kind of overlaying the 18th century is the growth and development of the Enlightenment, which is going to be incredibly influential in shaping our worldview. Let's begin by just looking at a sample of the Rococo, which was a style of painting, sculpture, and architecture. I'd like us to take a look at this, which is called the Swing, and it's by one of the pretty famous Rococo painters whose name is Fragonard, and you can find this image in your textbook. With the death of Louis XIV, the King of France, after he ruled for 50 years and enforced a rather rigidly classical style, the French classical Baroque, housed at Versailles, there is a rebellion against this by the aristocracy. The upper class, the rich, will go back to Paris at the death of Louis, and they will begin to live their own lives in private salons or apartments or townhouses and fill these places with art. The painting that we're looking at is very typical of the kinds of examples that were created by the French aristocracy in the period of the Rococo, the first half of the 18th century. This is, in other words, art that was specifically crafted for the rich, and I'm going to stress the idle rich, who had nothing of significance to do. One of the things that they did do was to play games of love, and this painting is a reflection of that. First of all, I would like you to see that the style itself, compared to the Baroque, which came before it, is lighter, it's more delicate. The figures within the painting itself, those figures are small in comparison to the size of the composition. It is playful. It is frivolous, it is gay, it is fluffy, it's less imposing, less monumental, definitely less serious. It does maintain some of the devices of the Baroque, and among them, we can find the Baroque diagonal continue as it runs right through the two figures, the two main figures in the composition. However, the painting itself is a picture that is very frivolous by its very nature, by the subject of it, for example. No Baroque artist would ever paint this picture. What is the subject of the picture? Well, it's a lady. She's on a swing and she's being pushed by this older gentleman. He's kind of tucked into the corner, so we don't pay too much attention to him. And as she's swinging back and forth, there is a man located right here who appears to be leaning back and swooning from the delight of looking up her dress. This is a painting about a guy looking up a woman's skirt. Now, the woman is his mistress, and you might pause for a minute and ask yourself, does she know what's going on? And the answer is, oh, yeah, because she's encouraging him. She's actually kicking off her shoe in a very, very playful way. If we take a look over here also, there is a statue in this very lush landscape, and it's Cupid, and he's holding his finger to his mouth as if to say, shh, don't tell anyone about this game of love. It is a teasing picture, an erotic picture, a frivolous picture. It shows a woman dressed in satins, abundantly dressed in satins, as she kicks up her stockinged foot. She's surrounded by lush vegetation. You could almost reach out and touch it. It's kind of cushy looking. It seems to be filled with stuff everywhere, puffy clouds, luxurious greenery on the trees, flowers in the foreground, and then, of course, this amazing garment that the woman is wearing. The colors favored in the Rococo tend towards pastel. Everything seems to be delicate, to be pastel, to be small in scale, dainty, frivolous in general. And when you walk into a museum that has a room devoted to the Rococo, immediately you can recognize it. There is a delicacy, a pastel quality. And if you had to gender it, I think you would say it is feminine in its delicacy and coloring. By the second half of the 18th century, the Rococo is going to be replaced. There will be, in fact, a pretty strong reaction to that style. And the cause of this is the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is really a movement in philosophy. And the best explanation I have seen or a definition for the Enlightenment, I'm going to borrow because I like it so much. And it goes like this, that the Enlightenment was a revolution of the mind that occurs before the fighting can start. Okay, what fighting? Well, that fighting will be the French Revolution beginning in 1789. The Enlightenment made that revolution possible. It also diminishes the acceptability of the Rococo. It is an intellectual movement that is led by philosophers, by thinkers, and by writers. These are in France, these are in Germany, these are in England. I happen to have on the screen just one example for us, and it is Voltaire, who is one of the great French philosophers. Voltaire and others are going to say essentially that human affairs should be governed by reason. And our end game in everything we should do is for the common good, not for the privileged elite, but for the common good. It also suggests that we should turn away from the tradition of the past and the past authority. We should question it. We should use our reason and follow a path of morality. And we should also look to nature instead of looking at things that are artificial. One of the things that the 18th century philosophers suggested we do, in fact, is return to the ancients to look at what the Greeks were doing, look particularly at what the Romans were doing, to look at their writings and to consider their philosophy as well as the new writings in the period of the Enlightenment. All of this causes individuals to question the continuing path of following a divine monarch and the continuing path of following the rules of established religion. The ideas that spring up in Europe are going to spread to the United States. So, some of the great founders of the USA, and I'm thinking folks like Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, among others, these folks are also going to follow the Enlightenment and they're going to borrow ideas that are hatched in Europe. There are numerous philosophers, writers, thinkers, and changers in this time period. Another is a man whose name is Rousseau, and I would particularly like to bring your attention to this guy. His name is Diderot. And Diderot, another Frenchman, is important for compiling a 35-volume encyclopedia. Why does that matter? Because it brings together in one place a collection of knowledge for everybody. This is a period of the expansion of knowledge and of science. Guess who owned a copy of that or the set? Thomas Jefferson. So this is being imported. This New World Vision is being imported into the United States. It proposes the idea that people can improve through knowledge and that we should all have access to knowledge. It proposes the importance of the scientific approach, testing knowledge, questioning it, and engaging in more critical thought. Part of this is prompted by the age of discovery. And I'd like you to think in the 16th century, for the first time, the New World is discovered by Europe and the contact, new people, new animals, new plants, coupled with scientific investigations, all of this is going to coalesce in the period of the Enlightenment, which is going to question authority. And particularly question the power of royalty and the aristocracy. Now, nowhere in this does anyone say, let's have a revolution. It is, however, the conclusion that will be naturally reached. The style that will ultimately derive from ideas of the Enlightenment will be the neoclassical style, and this is the second half of the 18th century. It is also the style that will serve the French Revolution. The artist in particular who's noted for that is David. David was a painter of themes that did support ideas of the revolution. He will later go on to support Napoleon as well, as you can see from this particular picture. This is David's Napoleon crossing the Alps, and you will find this referenced in our textbook. It's one of the most famous of the neoclassical paintings. It is in contrast to Rococo, and it is, in fact, a total rejection of Rococo. It is a subject that is important historically, politically. It is not a teasing subject. It is not a frivolous subject. It shows Napoleon on his horse leading his troops through the Alps on conquest. So that this is a subject that deals with something of significance and is a direct rejection to everything that is Rococo. And if I have to gender this, I would probably say that it tends to be male. It is a painting that focuses on line. It is very crisp. It is very clear. The figure tends to fill the frame of the composition. It does move along a diagonal that we would find all the way back to the Baroque. If we go through our horsey, it's running through a diagonal, just as the landscape is below it. And the Cape of Napoleon also echoes the diagonal of the horse and the diagonal of the landscape. But in this case, this has become an image of political propaganda, suggesting to the viewer if you simply follow Napoleon, he will take you onward and upward to the glory of France. As he points with his finger to the direction where he will take the French people, and he looks directly at us. Forms are very, very solid and in comparison to the Rococo, relatively austere or simplified. They have a strength and a clarity to them. All of the forms are crafted in a very linear way. We don't see any of the brushwork. The artist doesn't want to distract us with the paint surface or the handwriting of the artist. Everything is dealing with a clear subject, and in this case, generally speaking, neoclassicism deals with moral subjects, subjects that teach, not subjects like Rococo that are playful. The style of neoclassicism will very quickly be challenged by another style known as Romanticism, which reflects the emotional turmoil and turbulence of the Age of Revolution. As we take a look at the left, this is Jericho, and it is his charging officer. In this particular painting, let's take a closer look. In this case, the artist relies on passion, on emotion, on color, and on a lot of loose brushwork. And I'm hoping you can see it in the tail of our horsey and also in the mane of our horsey. Take a look at the flaring nostrils of the animal and the bulging eyes. This soldier on horseback also is not as much in control as the painted image of Napoleon. Let's take a look again. Okay, the details here. The story of Napoleon in complete icy control. This is an image that tells a story to the viewer that is intellectual. The one on the left is conveying feeling to the viewer so that you respond emotionally. As we return to the comparison, you can also see Napoleon painted by David is shown along a single plane. It is parallel to the picture plane or the surface of the canvas. In the Jericho, however, on the left, the horse goes along a diagonal, moving us into the background, so we enter the space of the composition. Why? Because he wants us to feel something. The smoke and fire of the battle is in the background, and the sky is turbulent and charged with energy. The difference between Romanticism and Neoclassicism: Romanticism wants us passionately involved. Neoclassical painters want us to learn something from their pictures, and they are much more controlled.